Good afternoon. Welcome back to the B&H event space. You're tuned into the documentary approach with Adam Isfendiyar. Adam, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you on, man. We've been talking about setting this up for a while, actually. I feel like better part
But-
of the past year. Life has been lifing for both of us.
Yeah, yeah. And I was initially supposed to do this talk in 2019, in person in New
Yep.
York. But for various reasons that didn't actually happen. Um, and yeah, great to have finally made it.
Yeah, definitely. No, it's such a great topic, and it's always hard when I do interviews like these because when we talk, it's like I want to get all the information out. I'm so curious and so interested in the story and how every thing came about, but then it's like I want to save some for the actual day of the event, and it's something to me about learning something for the first time live with all the viewers that just adds a little bit of flair to it. But I want to just talk a little bit and get everybody acquainted with who you are as a person, who you are as a photographer. How did you get your start in photography?
It's quite a long story, so I'll try and cut it short. But essentially, I went traveling. I was quite burnt out in the work I was doing. I was living in Japan, decided to buy a camera and go traveling. And this was in 2015. I lose track of dates, but I think it was 2015. And I bought a Nikon D3300. I went to Myanmar and on my own. And the first night I was there in Yangon, started talking to a guy in a bike shop, and he asked me if I could take a photo of him and his son. So I did. I thought, this seems like a good use of my camera. Um, and then found just people kept asking me to take. I was carrying my camera with me everywhere I went. People asking me to take their photo. Then it turned into me asking people if I could take their photos. And I got home from that trip. It was 2 weeks, and I looked at my photos, and I loved doing it. It was just an instant like feeling of I really enjoy doing this. There's a few things. I felt like I had a sense for what worked and what didn't. At least for me anyway, because it's all
Mhm.
very subjective. And also the fact that it meant I could meet people. Like if I didn't have that camera, I would have gone traveling on my own. I would have met other travelers probably, but I met so many people that I just would not have spoken to, that I wouldn't have had any interaction with if I didn't have that camera. And that really is what made the majority of that trip for me, was the people I met, the local people I met. And then it became a bit more proactive in that I was actually going out to seek that. So that's how I got started, and it all kind of snowballed from there.
Yeah, it's like a snowball. It's like right in line. I think a lot of people, it's like a story that starts off over here, it goes way over here, comes down here, and then you kind of finally settle on what you want to do. But it sounds like the documentary approach to photography for you was kind of right from the start. I mean, it was people, different cultures. You were kind of just thrown into that storytelling right from the get.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, documentary's always been something I love. Like if
Hmm.
if me and my girlfriend are going to watch something on TV, she generally always wants to watch a film or fiction. I always want to watch documentary. And it's the same with books. I much prefer, it's not necessarily I prefer, I do like fiction, I do like films, but I tend to gravitate towards documentary, real stories. There's something in real stories that I just feel so drawn to, and also traveling. But so that kind of brought all that together as well for me. And I then went traveling actually with I bought some lenses. I got back to Japan, bought some lenses, went to the Philippines, and bumped into a guy on a beach in some beach bar. And he was talking to me. He was a photographer as well, and he told me about Joey El. So I looked him up, and then I was like, "Oh man, this is what I want to be doing. I really want to be doing this kind of thing." And I had like a personal interest um, in indigenous cultures. I'd heard about the Ainu a while back when I first moved to Japan. and I bought this book in a market, and it was a Japanese book. I couldn't read Japanese, still not that good at it either. But it was a really cool little book, and I bought it. And my girlfriend at the time explained to me that it was about the Ainu, and the images were just really, really drew me in. Like I didn't have to know what it said, just the images really jumped out, and I it just stuck with me. I didn't realize the Ainu still exist. I thought they were like, they were at that point of her explaining it to me. She sort of explained it to me as though they were this sort of like mythical people that may or may not have existed, a long time ago in Japan. And then a few years later, I found out that there are actually Ainu communities, and they do exist. And so I had this camera. I was in Japan. I had ideas to potentially leave Japan and do a project somewhere else, and historically I worked in sound, so I was thinking of doing a sound-based project. But since I had sort of found this new thing, um, I decided to look for things to do in Japan whilst I was there. And I'd made a list actually of documentaries sound documentaries I would have liked to have made, and one of them was about Ainu people, and one of them was about homelessness in Tokyo. So I basically started these two projects um, from coming back from that trip
Mhm.
in the
Did
um,
did you have a story? You hear a lot of times with documentary that you kind of people will go into it with an idea, and then the story kind of comes out. You have to pull the story out while you're putting everything together. Did you have much of an idea, or was it something that you just wanted to get in and learn about the culture, and the story kind of pulled itself out?
yeah, I mean, I didn't like it was really the main thing. I think there's like lots of aspects to it, but
Mhm.
the main thing for me, the main draw was like I really want to learn about this thing. It's like, it's the same thing, same reason why I want to go traveling to places that are maybe slightly obscure or like have got different cultures. It's to learn more about it and to experience something that I'm interested in, but um don't yeah, it's a way to explore a subject and to get to know it. And so yeah, I went in the Ainu project. I went in with, I had one image in mind. Like I literally had one image in my head that I wanted to make, and I did actually make it, and it was quite similar to how it looked in my mind, which is the cover image, which maybe we'll bring up at some point.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
but that, yeah, other than that, I didn't have a story in mind. I mean, a lot of it is also when I'm sure it's possible to, if you have a story, to then find the people to make that story with. But for me, I found it um, it was quite a challenge to get access to someone in the Ainu community. And also with the homelessness documentary, it was someone who I'd met actually whilst just out and about. He was selling the big issue. I don't know if do you have a big issue in America?
Oh, I don't know.
So it's a magazine. It started in London, but they have it in
Okay.
as well. So it's a
I'm gonna have to
magazine.
put my behind the scenes producers on that and look into that to see it.
Well,
Apparently, I don't know enough.
so it's a magazine that homeless people sell to make money, basically.
Interesting.
So they
Okay.
would go and collect a bunch of these magazines, and they have a spot in town that's their spot, and they sell it, and then they have to give some money back to the company, and then they keep some for themselves. So he was selling the big issue in Tokyo. I went to take a photo of him, and because I was quite surprised, it was the first time I'd seen the big issue being sold in Tokyo, and ended up talking to him. And he used to live in London. He spoke fluent English. Lived in London for nearly 10 years, and we then bumped into each other just randomly once when I was on a lunch break and went for a walk, had a chat, and then yeah, we ended up, I asked him if he'd be up for doing a photo documentary, and then I ended up sleeping on the streets with him for a few nights and just stayed in touch. And we, yeah, just made this documentary. And then it turned out he's a dancer. He dances for this homeless dance group. So that turned into working with them, and then that turned into another project which was called Dancing in the Streets, which I just shot last year.
That's awesome. I love how the progression of, just like we talked about, where one thing can kind of spawn another idea, another project from there. And it's like as you get more embedded and you learn more, you're introduced more to the culture, and kind of the stories just kind of pull themselves out from the initial just learning process. And I think that's why we connect, man. It's like my wife is the same way. She wants to watch a film. I want to watch a documentary. She wants to go lay on a beach when we vacation. And I'm like, no, I'd rather go learn. Like, you only got limited time on this earth. I want to go learn about different places, different cultures. And I think that's what's so cool about the approach to this project. I never knew about the Ainu until you introduced me to this project.
Yeah, a lot of people. I think actually when I bought it back, so I did. So what happened? I finished it as I was moving back to the UK, and that coincided with me having an exhibition in the UK. And at that time, there were a few Ainu related things going on. And I don't know, in London anyway, there's actually been quite a lot of Ainu related things happening. There was a manga called Golden Kamui, which came out in Japan and then was printed in English, and they had an exhibition in the British Museum around the same time as my exhibition. But yeah, a lot of people, I mean, including myself, I up until like about 2 years before doing the project, I didn't even know that they actually existed. A lot of Japanese people I knew didn't really know that they still
Really?
there were much. Yeah, they're not very well. It's I mean it's not it's they're just not they're not a very visible culture really unless you live in Hokkaido. There are Ainu people on mainland. Well, mainland is what I would call Honshu. There's 4 islands, so on Honshu, well, actually there's about 3,000 islands, but 4 main islands. Um, I think there are around 250,000 estimated Ainu people. Um, I think there's quite a few Ainu people who aren't who I've either don't know they're Ainu because there was a big in the late 1800s there was a big drive by the Japanese government to assimilate Ainu people. So there are probably people with Ainu heritage that don't necessarily either know that or they do know that, but it makes their life easier to not talk about it,
Interesting.
show it.
Yeah, I'm gonna get ready and pull up some images here because it's such an interesting culture and just the way you captured it. I'd love to hear about, anytime we talk about going in and capturing a culture from the outside looking in, there's so many questions that come to mind about language barriers. And obviously you said he spoke English, so language doesn't sound like it was too much of a barrier, but culturally, what was the cultural shift like for you? One thing that jumped out when you were first talking about moving to Japan and how people are coming up to you asking for pictures, and I'm like, man, that's a street photographer and documentarian's dream, is people wanting to be photographed and approaching a photographer, because so often it's the other way around where it's like, "Ah, I want that picture, but I don't know if I should go approach or how." And then when you throw in cultural norms, Japan is a much more modest culture with photographing people than per se the United States. So can you talk a little bit about just the cultural differences and stuff you experienced?
Yeah, sure. The so just to clarify, the Ainu project, he Matsuda-san, who is the main subject of that, he doesn't speak a word of English.
Oh, okay. Okay. I confused. Okay.
Yeah, no, that was
That would have made it easy.
yeah, that would have made it much easier. That would have made it so much easier. Um, Matsuyoshi-san, who was the homeless dancer, he speaks
He
English.
speaks perfect. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So the Ainu one, there were a couple of people within the community who spoke English, but they weren't around often. So it was mostly done in Japanese, which I can get by him, but I'm not. I'm certainly not fluent. And there's a lot of like smiling and nodding my head and just hoping I understood what was being said. Um, but culturally, and again with street photography, what I found actually was at the time when I lived in Japan, I didn't do that much like stopping people and asking them. When I went back last year, I did do a lot of that, and I found people generally to be as receptive as they are in London. Um,
Interesting.
and I don't know if it make like I don't know if it's would be different for a Japanese person as to being a foreigner. Like another kind of anomaly. Don't know if anomaly is the right word. Something which is you wouldn't expect in Japan is how open they are to picking up hitchhikers, and they foreign hitchhikers especially.
Mm.
It's a very easy place to hitchhike, surprisingly. Like even though people are generally quite a bit more conservative and a bit more kind of closed, maybe. Um, I actually, I on the one of my trips to Hokkaido, I actually had to, I messed up my timings. In fact, I didn't even check the coach timings. I got stuck in right at the north. So I went in February to see the ice flows. So in February, the there's these ice. I think it's the icebergs that break up and they
Okay.
flow from Russia down to Hokkaido, and then you just get this sea of, well, it is literally the sea, but it's the sea of ice. And I wanted to go and see it. So I was like, I'm going there in February. I'm going to go and do that. Then I'm going to go down to Akan. I've planned Akan is where Matsuda-san lived. I planned it all out, and well, not planned it that well. So I've stayed in this place that's called Abashiri, which is where the ice flows come in. And then I was like, right, I get back to Akan. I've got a few days there. I needed to shoot this one shot, which is of him looking over Lake Akan with the mountain in the background. It's the lake is covered in ice, and I knew I only had this time to do it because it was February. I couldn't come back. If I came back later in the year, unless like I came back within 2 weeks, the lake would have started to melt. I probably wasn't going to come back the next year. Like literally, I would have had to wait another year to get that shot. So
Mm.
I got to the coach station and it was, I mean, it's snow like up to your waist, no
Wow.
coaches, no hotels. I was just, what do I do? Like, I really just didn't know what to do. The only other option was to get a train back to where I just stay there, I think, until the next morning and come back and get a coach. So I just went, just thought I'm just going to go walk down the road with my backpack and see if I just stick my thumb out. And I got to this garage and put my bags down. Guy in the garage asked me what I'm doing, and I just said I'm going to try and hitchhike. Um, Stuck my thumb out. I got a lift within 5 minutes, and the guy took
Wow.
me all the way to Akan, which is a 4 hour drive. He was going to take me to the next town, which I think was about 20 minutes down the road, and then he just said, "Oh, where are you going?" I said Akan, and he's like, "Okay, I'll take you there." And it was like sleet, and so the weather was terrible. Like it was not great driving conditions. And he did an 8 hour round trip just to take me to this place. Wouldn't tell me his name, wouldn't let me take a photo of him.
Really?
I was like, yeah, he just dropped me off and then drove off. I said to him, "Can I like what's your name?" He said, "No, no, no, don't like." I was like, "Can I take a photo?" And, no, 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 no. And
Wow.
just left, and that was it. So yeah, and then because of there were weather issues, and I had to basically get this shot. We had like I think we had like a 1 or 2 hour window on one particular day, and if we didn't get it then, we wouldn't get it because it was the weather forecast was saying it was going to be heavily snowing, so we wouldn't have been able to get view. We wouldn't have been able to go up there basically, or if we did, we wouldn't have been able to actually get a clear shot. With the mountain in the background, we only had this one morning and only like a really small window to go and do it. And so I got there and I said to Matsuda-san, look, we need to go out there tomorrow morning to get this shot. And he just said no. So, um,
Wow.
okay, like we need to go out there and get this shot. And he, I'm going out drinking tonight. I'm not getting up early tomorrow. So, I need to get this shot. Like I've come all the way. Like I really, really need to. And he's quite, he's a very like no means no kind of guy. Like he calls a spade, and he's just like, no, I'm got a drinking appointment tonight. Like once or twice a week he will have like a real big blowout, get really drunk, go to bed about 3 and wake up at about 1 in the afternoon. And that was one of the nights. And I eventually I don't, to be honest, I don't know how I managed to persuade him, but I think I just said, look, it's really, really important. I really need to get this shot. So he got up, it was about 7 in the morning, and we went down there and we had about 20 minutes. It was freezing. He was like, he was fine, but he was just not really that thrilled to be standing outside in the freezing cold at 7 in the morning. So we had to do it really quickly. I was like balancing. I had one speed light in a really small softbox, like one of these sort of, it must be about, I don't know, about a foot by a foot kind
Mhm.
of softbox. One, a Yongnuo speed light inside, off-camera flash, just one flash there, him standing just in front of me. I was having to hold it up because the ground's really unsteady. So I had to kind of hold the stand up with my foot, stop it from falling over with my camera here, and just like trying to balance everything and get and direct him. So I was really, really pleased when we got back and actually some of those shots looked half decent. Because it's funny when you're shooting stuff and you're just like you've prepared and now it just comes down to like, is it going to work out in the moment? And it's great when like just a little bit of prep meant that I was set up to at least be able to get the image I wanted, even though the conditions weren't that easy. It might be, I don't know if you're able to bring up the
Yeah,
image.
yeah. I was gonna pull up some images. I wanted to set the table a little bit, but yeah, let's get some images rolling. It especially makes it hard too when, I mean, it's set up by no, we're not going out, and it's like an unwavering like, no, sorry, we're not going out, we're not doing this. That's kind of got to get in your head mentally.
There are a lot of like, I mean, that wasn't the only sort of challenge like that of doing. I mean, the whole, to be honest, a lot of this project was about having to navigate around those kind of things. And um, I think you asked about cultural issues before, and I think
Hmm.
some of Japanese culture is obviously quite different to most Western cultures, and getting, I really felt I had to get to know Matsuda-san as a person before we really did anything.
Hmm.
Uh,
Are these the images that you were?
that's the one where I was like balancing the speed light on my leg, and he didn't want to be there. You can see his right fist is clenched up because he
Oh,
was
that's
cold.
wild.
Um, and yeah, then he kept turning around to me saying, "Are we done? Are we done? Are we done?" And I was like, no, just a couple more. Yeah, and then this one as
That's
well.
interesting. Yeah, that.
And there was a bow and arrow one as well, which actually out of my three is probably my least favorite. Um,
You got the fist clenched,
the
and
bow and arrow one is further down.
there we
Yeah,
go.
yeah.
Beautiful shots.
So yeah, thanks. Like they were, like I say, I was quite pleased because it was a real like stressful situation. I needed to get. I really felt like out of all the photos I need to get this one, and that was the one that I said before that I'd sort of had in my head when I started the project. So this photo is so when I first went down there, I I don't know if I should regale you with the whole story of how I met Matsuda-san because it's quite a long story. Um, but trying to keep it short, I found I wanted to find out more about Ainu people. I found an event happening in another part of Japan and met him there. He then invited me to come to Hokkaido and help out in his. Well, in fact, he said I asked him if I could come to Hokkaido and talk to him about potentially doing a photo documentary, and he
Okay.
just said
Did you know much about Hokkaido before that, or was that on your radar?
I'd been there. I actually hitchhiked up there when I first moved to Japan. I didn't have anywhere to live for there was a summer period where like I moved
Okay.
from the city to Tokyo and I didn't have a place to live. So just for a few weeks. So me and a friend hitchhiked up to Hokkaido. So I'd been there. I was only there for a few days and then just came straight back. But no, not really. On the first trip there, I I spent a bit of time. I did woofing. I don't know if you know what that is, but it's working on farms.
Oh, no
So
way. No, I didn't know.
so I did a bit of that. I went to a few farms, and then I went to Akan to
Okay.
meet Matsuda-san. And he said to me in his response, he said, "It's summer. It's my busiest time of year." He owns a restaurant, which is the restaurant here in this photo that he's sitting outside called Banya,
Okay.
um, which is what it says in the blue writing on the yellow yeah. Um, sorry, I'm pointing to it. So anyway, um, so yes, he said. So I just thought, okay, I'm just gonna because I'd contacted a lot of people, and this was like my last attempt. So I just sent him a message back saying, if you need to, if you're busy, I can help you out. So he said, okay, if you can help me out, you can stay at my place. So I just went out there to see, what happens. And I just carried my camera. I took very few photos the first time I was there. I was there for about a week. I stayed in his house in one of it's not even it's called the Mahjong Heya, which is Mahjong, which is a game that they play
The
in.
game.
Yeah, yeah, and it's a room for playing Mahjong in. So just put a mattress out on the floor there, and that's where I stayed every time I went there. There is one. It's that room is actually in one of the photos, and just helped out in the restaurant. So I was waiting tables. He eventually would tell people because people would get. There's a lot of Japanese tourists there. You get a lot of tourists from China, Singapore, and Japan. And he started to tell people that I was his son um, from another marriage. Not people believe. So we used to kind of just go along with that. And yeah, so I was just waiting tables, cleaning dishes.
Why
But
why didn't you take too many photos that first week? Was it more of just getting acclimated and setting a tone and getting comfortable before, like, did you not feel comfortable taking images at that point, or?
yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's just me being a bit sort of shy in that sense, but I I didn't want to go in there just like taking photos of everyone
Mhm.
and that to be how people know me. I wanted people to be relaxed around me if I was taking photos. I didn't actually have any confirmation from him that he would be okay with me doing that. He knew I was a photographer. He knew what I wanted to do, but it wasn't until the end of the trip that I said to him or asked him if he'd be up for me coming back and doing a project together,
Okay.
which he instantly agreed to. But um, yeah, I wanted to. It was just. I think it was more of an instinctive thing, really. Just that I felt like going in there, taking photos straight away, just wouldn't really be that cool. And
Yeah. One, it helps, I think, if you know a little bit about what you're documenting. You kind of have to have a baseline level of knowledge and rapport, I guess, if somebody's really going to open up.
yeah, I mean, I didn't know at the time what. what I was trying to get there. So I was feeling out the
Mhm.
situation a bit as well.
Okay.
And I felt that first trip, um, yeah, I really felt it was almost like an initiation in a way because I was the all the staff at the restaurant were quite harsh with me, and they like I could tell they were, my Japanese isn't great, but they were like they weren't talking that politely about me. They weren't treating me that nicely. And I was just, in the kind of I was really a waiter in the restaurant. It was like,
Mm.
and I was the newest waiter in the restaurant, so I was at the bottom of the pecking order,
You had to
really.
pay your dues.
Yeah, so I really like for a lot of that trip, I just questioned what the hell I was doing there. Um, but I can be a sucker for punishment. So I just thought, okay, I'll go back, see if I can win them over. And then when I came back the second time, they were lovely. It was like it's funny. Every time I went there, there was such a change in how people responded to me. There were some people who initially were really friendly and always stayed that way, but there were some people who were very guarded, or kind of actively, um, just yeah. I mean,
They just
just
weren't kind of giving themselves. It was like kind of like they were just holding something back, like almost like a not so much distrust, but just trying to feel you out, I guess. Was it
yeah, I
something
think
like
so.
that?
Yeah, probably. But that really changed like every time I went up there. Like I felt like almost to the point where I felt like I could probably move here and call this home. But
Interesting.
yeah, and then actually towards I think the last trip I went on, there were people coming up to me asking if I could take their photo. Um, and there was a festival that I went to photograph, the Marimo Festival. And there's some photos in here from there, and there's a boat ride that goes around the lake. The lake's really important to Ainu culture, that particular lake, and they invited me on the boat, which is only for Ainu people, um, and they invited me on as like a honorary guest.
Wow,
Uh,
that's awesome.
Great. It was really cool. Yeah. And it was really nice. I think it was a really nice feeling for me just to feel like, okay, I've kind of clearly people are okay with me now. Because I think I'd
Yeah.
always have a question in my mind of like, do people mind me being here? Like, I didn't want to piss people off. I didn't really want people to feel like I'm coming in there and, um, just taking something from their culture.
Mhm.
And
Did you get a sense of that? I mean, I think we see it now with so many people traveling, so many people taking pictures. Was there a sense of, this is an outsider who's just trying to come in and take something from our culture and for the wrong reasons, for their own, use or their own, doing whatever with it. Did you get a sense of that?
yes and no. I think as I said, my first trip particularly, there's two. In fact, there's three main Ainu towns or centers in Hokkaido, and so this is Akan, where Matsuda-san lives, and Akan was um, it's a tourist village. It was
Okay.
made really for um, it was the winter workers would go. The people who basically didn't have sorry, people who didn't have work in the winter would go there to as a holiday resort. I think I'm getting this wrong. Um, it basically became because of it's a spa town, so it became a holiday resort, or it was a holiday resort for Japanese people. Sorry, I'll start again. It was a holiday resort for Japanese people. This is like back in the 20s and 30s, I think, and since then. Um, I knew people would go there in the holidays when they didn't have work to make extra money. And then some of that land got given to them by the landowner, who wasn't an Ainu person, someone called Maeda-san. And she gave them a plot of land basically. So people moved there, and that they sustain themselves off tourism really. So there's less of a sense, I think, of like you're coming to take something from our culture, because essentially that's what they've always made a living from, and that's what sustains the village there. There's another place called Nibutani, which I stayed in actually before I went to Akan for the first time, and I had much more of a sense in Nibutani that you're as an outsider, you're less welcome unless you know someone and you've been there a while, and you have to, like you said, you have to kind of pay your dues, or they have to get to know you. I spoke to someone recently. I occasionally get people contacting me and asking me, to put them in touch with people in the Ainu community, or saying that they want to do projects. And someone recently, and who I'm pretty sure she speaks fluent Japanese. She was working in higher education and knew quite a lot about the culture. And we had a chat, and I said to her, like, it's because she was going to Nibutani, and I said it's really difficult to go there once and expect people to open up to you, to talk to you, to even to care why you're there, basically. And she wrote back to me after she got back and said, yeah, it was really tough, and she basically couldn't end up doing. She didn't end up doing the project that she was hoping to do, because she just couldn't really get in with the community there well enough to be able to do anything. I did feel quite disheartened when I first went there, and it's quite a roller coaster of emotions actually doing something like this, especially in a different culture, where even though I'd lived in Japan for at that point 6 odd years, I still I still wouldn't say I was that. I mean, I there's a lot in Japanese culture that kind of goes unsaid sometimes, and you just have to pick up on the vibe. And so then you can end up kind of wondering whether, am I misreading this? But no one will really say to you, no one's going to say to you really, or very few people are going to say you're not wanted, or we don't want this. But you'll have to pick it up.
You got to pick up on the vibe. It's a read the room kind of culture.
Yeah. They say read the air. So yeah, you have to read the air, and if you don't, you don't. But like,
Was there a point where you were discouraged, like she had felt? Was there a point where you questioned whether you wanted to continue with the project? And obviously you did. So, if there was a question of it, how did you kind of push through that and get on with the project?
yeah, there were a lot of times. Like I said, the message I sent to Matsuda-san saying I'd help him out in his shop, I'd almost at that point, because I'd messaged a lot of people who I'd met at that event that I first met him at, who seemed very enthusiastic about me coming to Hokkaido, and then just either didn't respond, or just responded saying, yeah, good luck, sorry, can't help. And it just got to like, I had this stack of business cards, and his was the last one. And I just said to myself, if this doesn't work out, I'm not doing it. And then there were just, I think once I was in, and I got funding. I got a bit of funding from the Great Britain Sasakawa Foundation. So I had that, and I wanted to finish it. I never knew at this time. I didn't know where it would go. I didn't even have a website, I don't think, at this time. So I didn't really know what was happening with this project. I was just going there, taking photos, no idea where it was going to go, what I was going to do with it, really. And there were moments where, like the moment where Matsuda-san basically said to me, no, we can't do this photo. But yeah, those times I definitely just thought, why am I doing this? Like, what? This is just really frustrating. He's really annoying. Like this is not going how I want it to go. And there were, like I said, there were quite a lot of those situations where it was tough. Um, and yeah, I mean, I don't want to go through all like the negative scenarios, because there are a lot of good ones as well. And
Mhm.
I think what was what's really rewarding for me now, having done it, um, is talking about the story and knowing that I started off really with nothing, no connections in a foreign country, and then ended up being able to make this project, which exceeded my expectations in how it would come out visually. Um, where it would be shown, that I'd end up talking to you here, about it. Like, I really, I did not expect for any of this to happen. Like, it was just, I was going, I don't know what I expected really, but at the time there was just a feeling, I think, that just carried me through it, of like, this is a project. I'm here. I've started. I've put in a lot of effort. I need to see it through.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah,
And look at it now. You're talking about it in front of all these people, and it spawned other projects. I mean, I'd say it worked out for you.
Yeah, I'd say so. I think if you'd asked me like right after I'd finished it, like if you could
Uh-huh.
go back to the beginning, knowing what you know now, would you have started it? I probably would have said no. Um,
Interesting, really.
but I think just because it was in parts, it was
Hmm.
very stressful in parts. Um, but having that distance now, I would definitely say yes. Um, but yeah,
What is something you've learned from it that if you did go back, is there anything you would change about your approach to the project or any aspect of the project, or is there something that you did change in these follow-up projects based on what you experienced in this project?
that's a good question. I I can be a real perfectionist, and I think like a lot of photographers and artists, and I really, yeah, I really, the thing is, I don't think this is something I want to change, but it can be what makes things stressful. Is that, like, when I want to get something right, I want to get it right, and I want it to be how I want it to be. And if I don't get it, then I need to go back and get it. Um, and so I think I think what I've learned is that to for my work to be at the level I want it to be, I do have to push myself, um, to take that, to not be lazy, really. I think that's often what it comes down to, is like, I know when I look at the photos how I want it to be, and if it doesn't look like how I want it to be, then I need to go back and get it how I want it to be, rather than just being like, okay, that's okay, that'll do. Um, because I think there's a difference when I look at this work and some work where I've been a bit lazy, and I haven't, or maybe haven't been into it as the subject matter as much, and I've not done that. I can see the difference, and I can see that takes me. I think that's in part the subject matter is interesting. I think, it's just, um, I think, if I was advising anyone else who's at the start of their, journey with this kind of thing, I think finding, um, subject matters that are interesting is a good place to start, because, that's instantly just going to get people interested, whether your photos are great or not.
Yeah.
But I think this, yeah, it just taught me. I think I can look at that and compare it to other work and see, okay, actually, this photo you were just showing of the mountain,
Oh yeah, yeah.
that one, I had to get that shot, I had to wake up at like 5 in the morning. It was freezing, like, I mean, it was below freezing. It was about minus, I think it was probably around minus 30. Um, and just walk through these woods in the dark, um, freezing cold, just to get. I remember like walking in a circle for about half an hour there, waiting for the sun to come up. My feet absolutely freezing, just having to sort of keep them moving and just keeping my body moving, just just to not freeze. Basically, I'm sure I wouldn't have actually frozen, but just it was so cold. Um, And yeah, so it's not, you don't have to obviously, walk through the snow for hours and you know um, torture yourself to get a good photo. But I think throughout the series, if I look at it through the series, there were some of the best images are the ones where it's like, okay, that was difficult to get, but I'm glad I did it.
Mm. It's like the no risk, no reward, the tougher
Yeah.
images, the ones you have to fight for. And I think ultimately this project in general, and going back to what you had just said, right a couple minutes ago, you have to be passionate about something, follow stuff that you like and that you're passionate about. And I think that's what drove you through and got you through to the end of this project. It's like if it was kind of just like, I'm not really passionate about it, I'm not interested in it, I don't really care either way, you're not going to push through. But I think it is that interest that you had in this culture that is what kind of helped you stick it out and be so determined to get through the project.
Yeah, and I wanted to, to what extent I'm helping to represent the culture. I wanted to do that in a way that was sort of respectful um and beautiful as well. I wanted the images to look nice, to the people to see them and for want of a better word, to see them and to be interested in the culture and for the people the Ainu people to see what I've made. That was also something that it was nice for me to be able to show them these photos and for them to enjoy them as well
Yeah,
and see.
how was that received? How did you bring it about? Did you wait? Were they looking at were they, are they even interested in seeing the images while you were working on the project, or was this something that you presented to them once it was completed?
Matsuda-san he was quite interested. Like he'd asked me what's going on with the photos, and like I said though, I didn't really have an aim. It's going back to a question that you asked me before. I don't know if I answered it fully, which is I don't. The story comes together as you're doing it. I shot a load of photos, and then it got to the point where I just had a lot of photos, and I didn't really know what the finished series looked like. And so for that was one reason why I didn't want to show anything to anyone, because I didn't know what I was going to use and what I wasn't. My attitude at the time was to shoot everything and then come back and go through it all and then to create the narrative from what I'd made, and something would come from that. And it kind of did, but then I realized I needed to go back and do one more shoot, um, which I self-funded just before I left Japan. And I'm really glad I did, because I got a lot of the photos that were in the final cut were from that one short
Oh,
shoot,
interesting.
that short trip. Um, but yeah, it was. I mean, I've made the book. I don't know if I've shown you the. I've got the book here. So
There it is.
so finally got the book done last year, and I've sent a copy to Matsuda-san. I've sent a few prints to other people in the community. Um, yeah, I mean, he seems, to be honest, he seems to like it. I'm not like, um, partly because I haven't actually seen him, and since I came back to the UK, I haven't been back to Hokkaido. That was 2018.
Oh,
So
wow.
any reactions to images? I've not actually been there when people
Do you have plans to return in the future or near future?
not in the near future. I mean, I'd love to. It's really time and money, like
Yeah.
everything. I don't. Yeah, I'd really like to. Um, like I say, it's been what, nearly over 6 years since I've been there. Um, so yeah, I would really. I went to Tokyo last year. Didn't get a chance to go up to Hokkaido. But I'm really keen to go back to Japan,
Mhm.
and will next time I go there. So this was the first for my first trip. This was the only shot that made it to the final cut. One of the few shots that I took actually. And I asked. I don't think I took any photos up until this point, and I asked Matsuda-san if it would be okay for me to take some here. We were visiting his parents' grave in near where he lives. This is in a festival called Obon, which is happens in Japan in usually in August, and all like it happens across the country. It's a real big festival where people go to their ancestors' graves and tidy them. And yeah, I really like this image because in part just because it's the first one that I took of this series chronologically.
It's holds like a special place
Yeah,
in your
yeah.
heart as something like I feel like that first image can really set the tone, and it's such a comforting feeling to get that first one out of the way, and from there it's like writing the intro to a school essay, and once you get the intro out of the way you're like, okay, I feel a little bit better about the rest of this now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, definitely with this, it's always, I mean, yeah, I always find it a relief when you get back. You're like, okay, yeah, that's actually quite a good photo. And then, yeah, and then you have a few more. And this one was on the second, I think it's the second trip, and he took me out for a drive just around the island, around Hokkaido. Um, and this is one of the lakes nearby. And I think this at this point as well, on the second trip, I was much more free and easy with my camera.
Mhm.
Uh,
And he seems super comfortable in front of the camera, like he's owning this right here.
yeah, I know. Definitely. I mean, he really liked it. To be honest, I think he really liked having his photo taken in general, and liked the idea of having me sort of follow him and learning about Ainu culture as well. And yeah, I mean, this stuff like this where I was just like, right, I'm just going to take a photo. I don't think I'd even tell him. I'll just
Mhm.
start taking.
Yeah, how did that work out? I know we did have a question come in actually. Cooper behind the scenes was asking about permission as far as different people that you took pictures of, if you always asked permission or if you had to get releases or anything like that. And I'm kind of interested, just on the whole, how much of it was just you kind of blending in and observing, or how much of it was like an active, he knows you're there, he knows you're documenting it.
Not much of it was set. I mean, I don't know from his side. I don't know how much of it
Hmm.
is necessarily like put on, but I don't think a lot of it was because a lot of the time I don't think he knew I was taking photos, or he was just doing his own thing. There's one, I don't know if we've gone past it, of him smoking a cigarette at work. I don't think he knew I was there taking photos. Ones of him cooking where I don't think he knew. Obviously, ones like this were staged. There are a
Hmm.
few. I think the stage ones are obvious. There's one of him sitting in the mahjong room, which I mentioned before, and that was staged.
Okay.
Uh, but other than that, it was all of the ones with other Ainu people in as well weren't staged. I mean, like this was he. I doubt he knew I was taking
Mhm.
this photo, for example.
And at a
Uh,
certain point, you probably just blended in anyway. After so much time around him, you kind of just, you're a fly on the wall at that point, right?
yeah, yeah, definitely. And I think in terms of permissions, I got a signed release from Matsuda-san, and he agreeing to get the funding, he had to sign that. So I already had that, and for there are some images of other Ainu people in the book and in the project, and I asked because I don't have direct contact with all of those people, so I've asked people in the community to find. I'd send them the photo and say, "Do you know who this person is? Can you please ask them for permission um, and to sign a release form to allow me to be in the book?" And no one said no. So
Wow.
yeah, that was good. And
It seems like everybody, I mean, from the beginning with people asking for you to take their photo to everyone being so cool with that. I think that's another cool thing about seeing different cultures captured and really studied and documented, because we have these preconceived notions. And I had always thought that Japanese culture. My sister-in-law is Japanese, and my brother lived over there for a number of years. And he's told me, he's like, you can't really do what you do in New York over there. So it's like my idea of it has just always been way more reserved. And I think we miss we misrepresent a culture in the way where, it's one thing being out on the street, but when you're ingratiating yourself to a culture and you want to learn about a culture and you're genuinely documenting a culture, there's definitely a much different perceived response from the people, right?
Yeah, I think so. You mean perceived response from the people within the culture or the audience?
Exactly. Yeah. It's not like I'm going over there, and it's definitely, if you're out on the street just snapping photos of people, it's way different than going over. You've obviously put in the work and the time and the effort to learn about the culture, and it's a different form of documenting that I think people, even a reserved culture, is going to be much more accepting, you would think, of somebody who's having taking your approach per se than somebody who's just going over there and photo tourism or just running along the streets taking photos.
Yeah, sure. And I think in Japan, especially, as a culture, they generally appreciate people that work on things, for a sustained period of time and put in a lot of effort and, show they're committed and all of those kind of things like go quite a long way in Japanese culture. They're quite, they're quite big values, I think, within the culture. This is the Mahjong room, by the way.
Okay, that's what I thought.
And yeah, I think that a big part of it, though, I think, was what sort of came through. Because for me, also, there was this idea of what Ainu culture is. And I went in with, that cover picture is what I had in my head. And that was a slight sort of romanticizing of the culture. And I wanted to have some images that did romanticize it a bit, and not necessarily to contrast, but just to go along with the everyday images of like, well, this is actually what it is. He's a guy, He's basically he's a guy the same as you and me. He works in a restaurant. He smokes cigarettes. He drinks beer. He's not, there's we're all just humans, really. At the end of the
Mhm.
day, that's kind of what I think. If anything, that's what I want to bring out or to show, or if there's any kind of, I'm not, I don't really have like any necessarily lofty goals for my work, but I think just for people to see this and go, oh, actually, yeah, that's interesting because like I've got this idea of this culture, but actually they're just people as well. So similar to us. His house looks different, obviously, and um, it's interesting in some visual ways because they're things we're not used to, and um, but I think just bringing out the actual individual for me and the personality is what I think is much easier to do when you know someone and you've got to know them and you've put in the effort to do that rather than just meeting someone on the street and trying to get, because that's ideally what I would love to be able to do in street photography as well, but having such a limited amount of time
Yeah.
to do that, it's not always so easy.
Yeah. Now we had a question. I kind of wondered this as well. One of our viewers asking if, having previously worked in sound, did you do any audio or video recordings to incorporate or expand the range of your work?
I did do, yeah, I did do some video recordings. I did interviews with Matsuda-san, and I did just do some random recordings with the aim of possibly making a video. Um, I just never actually had the time to get round to editing anything together, and it wasn't that well shot. Sound, no, I've been thinking about this recently, actually, about possibly incorporating sound with my work. So that is actually quite a a current topic in my mind is how I could do that possibly. But no, it would have been nice, but I didn't, unfortunately.
What about video documentary down the line? Is it something that interests you, or you
Yeah,
more?
I mean, definitely, yeah. It does. I, to be honest, I don't. I like shooting video. I just like anything creative, really.
Mm,
Um, there's something about photography, though, for me, which is I would rather hone my skills as a photographer and be able to tell stories and improve my storytelling techniques in photography than sort of spreading myself across different mediums.
mm.
Yeah, I do. I do. I mean, I have. I made some in college, but um, I think at the moment, still, I'm going to stick with photography for now.
What's the main thing that you took away from this from a storytelling perspective? I mean, you went into it having an idea of that image that you wanted. You got that image. Do you feel like you captured the story the way you wanted to? And what was your main takeaway from a storytelling perspective?
Um, Again, a good question. I I think it was to try. Well, one thing is to trust that the story will come, because I think that can it, it can be quite daunting to throw yourself into a project not knowing what the outcome is going to look like. And I think different photographers, different artists work in different ways. And sometimes you work for clients who want to see what the thing looks like. And you're just like, well, I don't know what it looks like because it hasn't happened yet. And I think for me, it's, yeah, there's a certain amount of preconceiving of ideas and storyboarding and stuff you can do. Um, but I know well, I think my style usually, and this applies to shoots as well, is, and I always tell people when we do a shoot, um, most of the time I tell people the majority of the good stuff kind of tends to happen towards the end of the shoot, because it takes a bit of time for us to warm up to each other, for me to know what you like, for you to know how I work. As we get closer to the end of the shoot, things start coming together more, and we start to see something actually coming out of it, which makes sense. And I think for me, on a long-term project, that also applies, that you're it can start to come together more towards the end. That you have to get to know the subject matter first. That's the way I work anyway. And I think just for myself, it's been an understanding, I think, of how I I work, and to sort of trust it, that I can actually create something, even if, so I'm probably not wording this very well, but like that it's the thing will work out at the end of the day. Like I have to trust in my,
Trust the process.
yeah, and just trust my own skills, and trust that I am doing something um that will work out. And
Mhm.
a story it always does, and it always has. There's always a story that comes out, even if it's not clear at the start. And sometimes it's not good for it to be clear at the start, because you need to get to know the person first. That's the whole point of doing the documentary approach, is, for me, is to get to know the subject matter, and it's then that you start getting photos which can maybe convey something at a deeper level, or yeah.
I love that. No, and I want to thank you for your time and sharing this project. Like you said, we've been talking a year just for the virtual, but this was originally
Sorry
had
about
it
that.
had its making way
Entirely
back.
my
But yeah, way back before the pandemic is when we originally, spoke about talking about this project. But this is such a great reminder that you know, you don't need to wait to have all the pieces put together. And if you're interested in something, you're passionate about something, just do it. Throw yourself out there. It's not always going to be comfortable, but this is a story of determination and sticking with something. And you have an option when things get tough. You can either pack your bags, or you can stay and you can persevere and you can see it through to the end. And these images are proof that if you stick it out and you get through to the end of the project, like I said multiple times throughout this, you've already spawned two other projects from this. And I think things get easier. And being a photographer and a professional photographer is about figuring out situations. It's about overcoming problems and finding solutions. And that's what ultimately brings you to the end of a project. Is it's never going to go right if you don't persevere.
Yeah, sure. And just to, I know we're running out of time, but just to kind of add to that is, I'm not sure if I mentioned this, but I know we spoke about it before, that those main images, for example, were taken on my Nikon D3300, which is, it's an entry level, cost me £300, digital crop sensor camera with a kit lens. And then they were good enough to blow up, to I've had them A0, I think, exhibited. And that's been printed in National Geographic as well. It's so you don't have to, don't I mean I love my gear, and if I had enough money
We're
on
gonna
top.
we have a there we go. Just so everybody can we got the visual cue right here. That's what did all the magic. That's what created this project.
The majority of it, I'd
The
say, but
majority, yeah.
I did end up upgrading to a D750, which I shot some of the last photos in, but at least I would say half of the images were done on this camera, which doesn't even have the rubber hand grip. Um,
Modest.
yeah, so yeah, I mean, like I say, I love my gear, and I think obviously if I would rather have a nice, expensive, fancy Leica than that Nikon, but it's still you don't need that to be able to do to go out there and to start your own projects. And yeah, like I say, I think just being bold and going out there and knowing that it can be tough. It's not always doing these projects. It's some of these images look really nice, and I see people like travel photographers who take great images, and it, a lot of the time those images were hard work. Like there's hard work behind the scenes that you don't always see. So yeah, it's just a lot of it is about persevering as well.
Definitely. Well, Adam, wonderful project. I want to thank you again for coming on the platform and sharing it with us and all of our viewers. We did drop a link to the YouTube. We got a little video there, Adam flipping through the book so you guys can see the book. Where can we purchase the book?
At the moment, directly from me is the best way. I don't know if you've got a link for my.
Yeah, we'll
Um,
drop your we got our wonderful producers behind the scenes that'll pull that link up. Is that right up there on your website, Adam?
I've got a couple of websites. I does it help for me to put it in the
Oh yeah, go for it. Go for it. We'll drop a
uh,
link in there and
yeah,
we'll make sure we get
Instagram?
that dropped into the YouTube for all of our viewers out there.
Uh, so you can get me on Instagram. I mean, basically, if you Google my name, you'd find it. There aren't many Adam Isfendiyars out there. But also, as I'm typing this, I just want to say thank you so much for being so patient with me, because I have, for various reasons, had to move schedules around, and I really, really appreciate how accommodating you've been with that, and really, really grateful for you having me on here.
No, of course. It was our pleasure. This is something that we love to put work like this out into the world. And one of the great things about the platform is being able to share various voices, and work doesn't do anything if people don't see it. So we like to put great work out here like this. And I think it really is such an inspiring story that you have shared with us to really just go out there and tackle it. Don't wait for anything. Don't wait to get the better gear. Don't wait to get your ideas all put together. Just go out there and execute. And that's what you did there. We're going to drop those links. Please definitely do check out Adam's work. His Instagram is right there. Website is there. We love to see people support our speakers. And Adam, huge thank you once again. We finally got it done, man. We made it happen.
Gonna celebrate.
Yes, definitely. Huge
That's
thank you once
fantastic.
again to Adam and all of our viewers out there. Thank you guys for tuning in. Another edition of the B&H Event Space now in the books. Catch y'all next time.
Thank you so much. Bye.